Hey guys, we're back with 3.1 notes. We're going to be talking about coordinates and slope today. So if you will take a second, pause the video, write everything you see. Perfect. So one of the biggest things that teachers and students alike both say incorrectly is when they're talking about a graph. Okay, a lot of times people will see one of these and say, oh yeah, that's a graph. Here's the problem. The x and y axis coordinate plane is the grid. That's the axes, that's the grid and the axes. If I put something on there, now that's a graph. That's a point. That's a coordinate point. Okay, a lot of people say that's an ordered pair. All of those mean the same thing. But the most important difference I want you to know right now is that the grid is the coordinate plane. What I draw on the coordinate plane, that's the graph. Okay? All right, so when we talk about graphing, it's important that we know how to graph those coordinates. So when you graph a point or when you name a point, remember that it is x, comma, y. The x moves us left and right. The y moves us up and down. So if we're going to go in order naming these points, let's make sure we use the x-axis for our first set of numbers. So for A, we are counting 5 to the right. That makes it a positive 5. And 0 up or down. 5, 0. For B, we're going 6 to the right and 2 down. That's a positive 6 and a negative 2 because we're going down. So X's go positive right, negative left. Y's go positive up, negative down. Looking at C, we're going positive 1 to the right, but then negative 5 because we're going down. For D, we have negative 7, that's to the left, and a negative 2, we went down 2. Following suit, E gives us negative 4. We went left 4, but up 3, so positive 3. Last one, point F, a lot of people say 5, 0, but we know that A was 5, 0, which makes F 0, 5. We went 0 left or right, and we went 5 spaces up. Okay? Let's see if we can apply that to graphing our own points. Make sure you're labeling these when we do them. That way you don't end up with an answer like, and you have no idea who's who, okay? All right, let's start with A. If I'm going 2 to the right, that's positive. 3, which way would I go? Hopefully you're saying down, so right 2, down 3. That point right there is going to be our A. Okay, let's try B. B is negative 3, negative 2. So we're going to go X's first, negative 3, and then down negative 2 on our Y's. This point is B. C is going to be negative 2, positive 3, so left 2, up 3. D is going to be 0, 3. Make sure you're going 0 left or right, but 3 up. Should be on the same up level as D and C. All right, E is 2, 0, so that's 2 to the right, and then 0 up or down. This point is E. And for our last one, F, we are going 3, 2, so right 3 and up 2. Those are your points. If you need any more time on this page, feel free to pause it, write anything you missed. I'll meet you on the next page. All right, same idea. I'm going to zoom out. I want you to pause the video, write everything you see, and then we'll continue. Perfect. So let's go ahead and talk about slope. The actual definition of slope is the rate of change for a line. So it's how quickly or how slowly that line is going uphill, downhill, or flat. It's a way to describe incline. So words that mean the same thing. If we're talking about word problems, you're going to use per, or for each, or for every. Those mean that you are multiplying with a variable. Okay, that's a slope or a rate. The M is going to come in handy when we are talking about our equation, y equals mx plus b. Rise over run is how we will count a slope on a graph. And that equation, y2 minus y1 divided by x2 minus x1, that's your formula for when I give you 2 points. We're going to be doing those 3 things today. I will let you know when to use each one, okay? All right, so let's jump into this screen. We have 4 different kinds of slope. It's important to know the difference by always looking at your graph. I'm going to draw my little eyeballs. Always looking at a graph from left to right. So I'm going to copy this. And I'm going to remind you that on all of these graphs, we're going to be reading them from left to right, okay? Okay, I know that's a creepy looking guide, but it's the easiest way I can remember to tell you where to look, okay? All right, so if we're going uphill, what would we use to describe our slope? Well, we would say that line is positive. Positive means that we are rising a positive number like a 2, and we are running a positive number like a 3. Your graphs will have a fraction or a whole number answer for their slope, so like 2/3. Okay? If we read from left to right and we notice that we are going downhill, that means that we are dropping like -2, but we still are running to the right. That is going to provide you a negative slope. Okay? But what if you're not rising at all? What if you were rising nowhere, just 0, but you were still running, let's say 4 or 5? Anytime you type a number 0 divided by anything, you are going to get a 0. What we say is that line has a 0 slope. Okay? He's not increasing or decreasing, he's staying steady. He's 0. Okay? Another way that helps people is to think about drawing a Z. If I use a horizontal line, I can make a Z out of that. That helps me remember that it's 0. Okay? Last one, when you have a vertical line, that would mean that you're rising. Let's say you're rising 5, but you're not running anywhere. You're running 0. You're running nowhere. If you type that in a calculator, it's going to give you UNDEF. What that means is undefined. We cannot divide by a 0. So what we say is that graph has an undefined slope. Okay? When we put these into context, there's a lot of real-world examples we can use. One thing I want you to think about is if you're making money. So if you are getting or earning a monthly payment. So that would mean you're getting the same amount of money every single month. You are increasing your bank account the exact same amount every month. That is a positive rate of change. Okay? If you were doing the opposite, so if you were paying a monthly bill, each month, then you would be losing money. Equal amount and losing by an equal amount each month. That would be a negative slope. 0 slope is something that stays the exact same over time. It doesn't increase or decrease. So that would be like my refrigerator temp. On a refrigerator, I set the temperature I want it to be. I shut the door and it stays at that temperature. It doesn't increase or decrease. It just stays right there. There's not much we have in real world that can increase and decrease without any time going by. It can just be every value in between. We don't really have anything like that, so we say there's nothing that's undefined. Okay? It's not a good real world situation. Okay? All right, so moving on to the last 2 sections. The words would be used when you're describing a slope. So for instance, the first couple questions on your homework say describe using a word. That's going to be like positive, negative, 0, undefined. The second section of your practice is going to be counting slope. So when you count slope, here's another couple things I want you to remind you. First of all, make sure that you are still reading that graph from left to right. I'm going to paste these, a few of them on your books. I would use this to remind you where you're supposed to be starting on a graph. Okay? Second thing I want to remind you is that your answer should be a fraction. It might simplify to a whole number, but there are going to be no parentheses, no commas. Everything for slope is a fraction. It's a rise over run. So I'm going to write that again. Your slope is going to be rise. It might rise up like a positive or down like a negative. But when it runs, it will always run to the right with a positive number. Okay? So I'm going to make a note to myself on problem 1. I'm starting on the left side. I'm going to rise up. Let me count this a little bit better. I'm going to rise up 1 box, bloop, and run 2 boxes, bloop, bloop. So my slope is rise positive 1, run 2. That's my answer, positive 1/2. That's it. That's all I'm doing. There's nothing to simplify. Problem 3, I'm moving next door to that. I am rising 0. I'm not going up or down, but I am running 1 dot to the right. Bloop. If I type that in my calculator, 0 divided by 1 is a 0. Okay? If you knew that one already without even counting it, that's awesome. You're already ahead of the game. Okay? All right, problem 5. We're going to go ahead and start up here. I start on the left because I read left to right, just like a book. I'm going to count my rise first, except I'm rising down. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's down, so -4. I am running 2 spaces to the right. Bloop, bloop. 2 to the right. -4 over 2 is not simplified. We are going to make that -2 as our final answer and our slope. Let's try number 2 on the bottom row. I'm starting on the left. So if I count my rise first, I'm moving down again. Down 2, bloop, bloop. That is going to be a -2 because I went downhill. -2 and run 2 again. Bloop, bloop. -2 over 2 is not simplified. I need to make that a -1 as my final answer. You can use a calculator or you can do it in your head as long as they are coming out correct. Okay? All right, notice that my bottom number is never negative. My top guys might be positive, might be negative, but my bottom guy is always positive. Okay? Problem 4, we're starting on the bottom because we start on the left. So I'm rising. How far? Rising up 4, that's positive. And I'm running 1 space to the right. 4 over 1 is not simplified. We need to make that a whole number, +4. Last question like this, you might not even need any work here. You might already know what it is. But if you don't, I would say, how much is it rising? Well, let's go from here to here. Rising 1 box. But it's running nowhere. In a calculator, this would be undefined. Okay? If you have any questions or missed anything on this section, go ahead and pause it, listen again, or rewind if you need to. We're going to move on to the last section. All right, last section of notes has everything to do with calculating, so you're definitely going to need a calculator. We're finding slope from 2 points using this formula. So it's going to be really important that you understand the labels. We have x's and y's. We have the first pair, x1, y1, and the second pair, x2, y2. Here is what I'm going to encourage you to do. I would set up every problem with a fraction and then a subtraction on top and bottom, because here is what that's going to let me do. It's going to make sure that when I plug in my numbers, I remember to plug in everybody. Ooh, I did that wrong. Sorry, give me just a second. I'm going to make sure to plug in everybody where they are separate from, sorry, I'm stuttering. Plug them in separate from that subtraction sign. Okay, so if I use this as my setup, and I'm going to copy and paste that for the top couple. Give me just a second, I'm so sorry. All right, what that's going to do is it's going to allow me to write my numbers and not have to worry about the minus sign. Okay, so my first point, or first number is y2. That's going to be a -7. My second part is y1. That's a -5. I need to write a -5 in the blue. I am not using this. That is this negative up here. It's part of the formula. That is not part of the -5. Okay? On the bottom, I'm doing x2, which is 7, and x1, which is 3. So in my calculator, remember that you can use the toolbox to type that whole thing in one big ol' fraction. All you will have to do is press enter. Okay? So if you do that, you should get -1/2. Okay? Maybe I can pull up my calculator while I'm talking to you. Okay? Let's try the next one. If I plug in my y2, that would be a -3. y1 would be a -5. x2 would be a -2. And x1 would be a 0. So if I plug that in, let's see what we get. I should end up with a -1. If that's something that you did not get, we're going to want to type that in a calculator, make it a little bit smoother. Let's see if we can pull that up. All right, so if here's your calculator screen, I'm going to go into Scratchpad real quick. All right, what I would do is I would use this toolbox here, clicking on him, choosing my top answer, and I'm typing in what we had, -3 minus a -5. And then on the bottom, I am doing a -2 minus 0. That's where the -1 comes from. Okay? Let's try another one. We're not going to do all of these. Let's try number 4. Okay, so y2, -8. y1, another -8. x2, a 7. And x1, a 2. All right, so let's type this in the same way we just did. I'm going to use my toolbox. And I'm going to type it in -8, -8 minus another -8, and then on the bottom, 7 minus 2. Your answer should be 0. Okay? If you are not getting 0, that means that something else is off. Okay? All right, we're going to try one last one. Let's go with y2 is a -1, y1 is a 4, x2 is a 1, x1 is a 1. We're going to type last one in. So toolbox, we're plugging in. So -1 minus 4 on top of 1 minus 1. Whenever you end up with 0 on the bottom of a fraction, it's going to spit you out that answer. It is going to tell you undefined. That is what I'm looking for. Okay? If there is any part of this that you missed, feel free to go back and listen again. Otherwise, that is the end of your notes for problems 3.1 to 3.2.